we are creating a platform for those who are curious, one that tells the story from the artist's perspective, moments in time captured from the innovators who are reshaping dance, music, theater, and the visual arts. This is the Working Artist Project.
All right, so today, for the Working Arts Project, I have Miss Gabrielle Murphy. Welcome, Gabrielle.
Thank you for having me.
You sound so professional because we have microphones. Thank you for having me.
Oh, don't be a hater.
This is great. Anyway, so basically what I want to talk to you about is transitioning.
Yes.
Transitioning from school into like into your professional life.
Okay.
And like what that's like in working a quote unquote real job and not working a real job and playing music and doing
Well, working as a professional musician is very different from being a student. Even if, one thing that I guess I didn't realize, even as a master's student, almost all through my schooling, both undergrad and graduate, I was always working like part-time jobs, and sometimes I was gigging. At one point I was actually gigging quite a bit and working a couple part-time jobs and in school. But it's still very different from just working full-time and also just working as a musician full-time, as a professional musician full-time. I guess I assumed it would be similar, since I was already working. But what I found, being a student, you're still kind of in a bit of a bubble, like a protective, like space, because, you still get loans or grants or whatever. So you always have like a little bit of extra income to pay for, the bigger things.
What do you mean?
Like your rent.
Oh, okay.
And, you might I would use like my part-time working money for like food or like, I know, extra things
Going
that I
to the
wanted.
club,
I never did things like that. Honestly,
okay.
I've never been a big club person. But yeah, for other extraneous things, extra stuff. And then, I would use my grant money or my loan money for like books, for bills, like large bills like rent and, utilities, stuff like that.
Right.
Whereas, then even working at full time, okay, so before I even get there, like, even though I was working part-time and in school and stuff, I still was able to make time to practice because I had to, because I had, classes and I had, assignments to fulfill. Whereas, then leaving school and now having to work a full-time job, I worked, when I was in Baltimore, I did my undergrad in Baltimore at the Peabody Institute. And when I was working full-time there at the time, I think I was working at Starbucks. And it was really difficult trying to balance practicing once I was working full-time because I needed to make a certain amount of hours to be able to afford my rent and stuff like that because I didn't have that extra padding anymore from my, my loans and my grants and whatnot. So there wasn't as much of a drive to practice because I would be so tired when I get home. And then also the hours, I've always had a policy, from the time that I started living in apartments that I don't practice past a certain time out of, respect for my neighbors and their,
right, of course,
their ears.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, it, sometimes those hours would conflict with the hours I'd set for myself for practicing time. And so I kind of fell off of practicing as much as I wanted to, which, kind of made it harder for me then to be able to play to the level that I wanted to be able to play and to be able to perform at the level I wanted to play. And, I suffered musically for that. And then when I moved up here, once again, I was in school, again, this time doing my master's when I moved up to New York. And that was also a very different experience because this time I didn't have as much, even though I was still a student and, I was also working again, it was still a very different experience because it was a different city. The cost of living was much higher. And I found that I had more responsibility, more things to pay for than I had previously. I didn't have as much saved up, or whatever I had saved up went much faster because it didn't go as far.
Right.
And then, but even then, though, there's still a little bit of a hedge being a student because I still had loans. And so I was able to, pay my rent. But then, of course, up here, the institution I went to school at Queens College,
okay,
the financial aid office was terrible. So there would be like gaps when I was supposed to have money and didn't have money. So that was also an
checks
issue.
Were late from school.
Like 2 months.
Oh man.
Yeah. So that was like another experience. But yeah, so that was also a little different because that wasn't something I was used to in Baltimore. They were really on top of their the financial aid was really on top of everything back in Baltimore. So I never had to worry about what I was going to do if I didn't have the money. Whereas here, that was an issue. And I'm one of those people that have a hard time asking for help or letting anybody even know that I need help.
Right.
And so, there was definitely some rough months. And so then going from being a grad student and a musician to just working full time because when I graduated, now I was working full time. I wasn't working enough gigs to be able to sustain myself.
You worked full time on a day job.
On a day job,
what were
yeah.
you doing?
So I worked as a temp for, and sometimes we would have long-term assignments. Sometimes they're short. But when I had long-term assignments, it was basically like working a 9 to 5 or 9 to 6.
Okay.
And, you'd think it'd be really easy because oftentimes they were like receptionist jobs, stuff like that. But it's very draining.
Yeah.
Being there all day. And so then I would get home and, oftentimes the offices would be far from my apartment. So I'd have like an hour commute. And then if I had to run errands, like get groceries or anything like that, once again, I'm coming up with that same issue that I had as far as me not practicing past a certain point. So once again, I suffered for that, but I mean, I had some opportunities in there where I forced myself to make time to practice. And that's when I really saw periods of growth. Then, so, I did that. And then this past year, music work started to pick up a lot for me. And so I was already miserable working a day job. It's just not for me.
Right.
And so I quit my job. At that time I was working for Ralph Lauren in their vintage and antiques warehouse, and then went to working full-time as a musician. And that is it's very different than I anticipated it would be. Mm-hmm. When you work a day job, especially the kind of job I'm working, you're working as a receptionist or whatever. You do your job, you're there, you know, whatever time. You go home, you're free. You know, you have your time to do whatever.
Yeah.
And even if I wasn't working that, even, some of the higher, some of the jobs that require even more work, like you might take a little bit of work home, but no. When you're a musician, your job extends well beyond the bandstand. It's not like, oh, you play the gig, you go home, you're done.
Right.
Like, no, like you have to learn music for different gigs. I've had situations where I had a church convention that I had to learn 9 songs for. Then I had to come back and I had like one show was like all this like old school rock. I had to learn like 30 songs for that gig. And then I had another gig the next day where I had to learn another separate 25 Prince and Earth, Wind and Fire songs, And like people don't realize that, being a musician is a like 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job.
Of course.
You never really take off from being a musician because even if you don't have a particular project that you're working on, even if you don't have like songs you have to learn for somebody else's gig, then you're writing your own music or you're practicing, you're shedding, to get, fundamentals under your fingers, or you're transcribing some stuff because you want to learn something new, or you want to build on what you already know. you're always doing something related to your craft. You know, so even when you're hanging out with other musicians, that's networking.
Right.
That's letting people know that you're there, so they'll
Right.
call you for stuff. Letting people hear you, so they can hear what you're capable of. You know, or you're posting, you know, stuff on Facebook or other social media sites, so people come to your gigs, so they know you're playing, so they know what you're doing, what you're capable of doing.
So it sounds like to you, being a musician is more a lot like running your own business. You know.
It is.
You know. So
Yeah.
Did you learn anything about that from like working in the, you know, in the regular world and like bringing that over to your musical career?
No.
No, nothing at all.
What I learned that you have to, you know, I learned a lesson about structure and time management. It's something I'm struggling with right now because it's, you know, when you work a day job, like you have a set time. You're supposed to be somewhere.
Right.
You have a set time. Like you can usually take your, you know, your lunch whenever, but you have a set time for lunch. You have like a time period for lunch. You have a set time for, you know, different projects you have to do in the office. You know, you have deadlines and stuff like that. Whereas when you're a musician, you make your own deadlines. You know, you have a certain amount of hours in the day to work on a certain amount of projects, and you have to dole out how much time you're going to spend on each project, or else it's very easy to let things slip and just not get things done. And, you know, there's going to be times you're not going to be able to get everything done.
Yeah, of course.
But, you know, being able to, or rather setting time limits for yourself is really helpful, and being able to get to the most things in the day as you possibly can.
Yeah. I have a trick for that.
What's the trick?
Like, if you write down everything you need to do in your calendar, like for instance, like the whole day, you just write everything you got to do, and then you won't waste as much time. At least that's how I do it.
Yeah.
Because you're right, you'll just be at home chilling,
Yeah.
practicing.
Right.
But you got other shit you got to do. Like,
Right.
you got to tend to your social media shit. You got
Right.
you know, write music, whatever you got to do.
Right.
Go to the dry cleaner.
I need to go to the dry cleaners.
Me too. That's on my list.
And I need to do laundry. I need to get it together.
You got to just drop that laundry off.
No, but yeah, you know, like you said though, it's like that's a great trick, you know, just writing everything down, looking at it and saying like, okay, I need to do this. Because oftentimes what I'll say to myself is, okay, I need to go to the grocery store. I need to do laundry. I need to do this, you know, and I want to shed, and I need to go to the gym. And I start thinking, okay, what can I do first?
Right.
And then I start like thinking like, oh, well, and rather than having it like written down and like looking at it and like planning it out, I think it in my head. And then I'm like, oh, well, I want to go this time, or I want to go that time, or oh, it's too late to do this. And then I always end up like only getting to like one or two of the 5 things that I had, you know, really wanted to get done that day. So,
like, how do you navigate the mostly male community, especially in jazz, you know, and like you're playing the most popular instrument in the saxophone? So it's already difficult, one, to get a gig, and then you're a woman trying to get gigs and compete with all of these dudes.
I have learned to smile a lot.
Okay.
And not say what I think, but think it nonetheless. To be professional, to be friendly, and to be myself. You know, one of the things that I've learned and has kind of surprised me in my time here, and I guess just my time on earth, but particularly my time here, being yourself, whatever that is. You know, people who are like-minded, who like that kind of personality, will be drawn to you. You'll be more likely to win people's hearts and endear them to you if you are who you are.
Right.
You know, and if you know, never kind of let your light dim. You know, and I think that I've been able to, and I think, you know, also this is kind of related to that. Relationships are so important in this music. And if you're able to have positive relationships with people and people like your personality, then it makes it possible for you to be able to get in. And then also just working hard at your craft and not really being concerned about what this person's doing or what that person's doing, or if they're better than you or if they're better than you. Like that's what kind of kept me, I think, working with and like getting people who, you know, who like me and my playing to hire me for things, because I'm not busy talking about this person and that person and that person. I'd rather spend that time working on me and my music and how I can become a better saxophone player. You know, how me, like not necessarily sound more like that person, but me as my own personal style. How can I make that better?
Right.
And I think that has